Hey,
Let's see
thank
if
you
I
for
can.
taking the time today, man.
Yeah, no problem.
I spent the morning listening to the new record, and it's great stuff.
Oh, thank you very much. Always great to hear that. You try to make art and try and hopefully make something that people can enjoy, but you never know.
Yeah. Well, we've run into this theme the last couple of weeks where, I have a son that's a little bit younger, and I feel like there's definitely a desire now for like real music, like with all the processed computer stuff that's been coming out for the last, 20 years.
I think so too. I mean, I'm surprised. It's really kind of weird. I don't think metal is really allowed in the United States in terms of the industry. I mean, I really think it's being suppressed. And the reason I say that is if you look through music history, there's always a cycle, and it'll be like, well, maybe this cycle country music is huge, and maybe this cycle, pop is huge, and then maybe this cycle rap is huge. So everything would always cycle around. And then all of a sudden, like about 25, 30 years ago, all of a sudden, well, 20, I guess more like 25 years ago, it's like rock was just like never allowed again. It's very, very kind of, I mean, and you think about it, I mean, I'm talking about bands like, think of Arch Enemy. They'll go play South America and they'll play in front of 500,000 people, and then they'll come to the United States and they'll play, House of Blues for 1,500 people. Like, how is this possible? I don't. There's no explanation for it other than the industry is not allowing metal to come to the forefront.
Yeah, it's
We're
because
being
metal's
repressed,
always been there.
man. We're being repressed.
Well, what you said is interesting too, because I met Mike Borden from Faith No More like years ago when they were touring around Album of the Year, and I remember him saying, "We'll go to Europe and play stadiums, and then
Yeah.
we come to the US and we're playing these tiny little nightclubs."
Yeah, it's kind of like ridiculous, right? I mean, you can't tell me that's not industry suppression. You're telling me people are so different around the rest of the world that all, like metal is huge everywhere else in the entire world except for the United States. Like, come on.
I think it's huge here, but it's just I don't know that it's marketed as well here.
Right.
And you're right. I wonder what the rationale behind that is.
Well, I don't know. I just think it doesn't, it's like for whatever reason, it's not allowed. I can't tell you the reasons for it. I can just tell you that I'm looking at the industry. I'm looking at, like for instance, if you go to Japan, there are shows that are there to break new artists and in different genres. In the United States, we don't have anything like that. And why is it that the only thing that's allowed at, major football games and all this stuff, like people talk about it, like, I'm sorry, has Metallica been at a Super Bowl halftime? Have they? I'm trying to remember.
Maybe. I don't think so.
Metallica?
Not
No,
like
no.
Aerosmith was a couple years ago, weren't they?
Yeah, I thought Aerosmith was. I mean, but most of the time you're going to see it's going to be pop and rap, and like you just don't see a platform for it in the United States. And conversely, you look at bands like Rammstein, and you look at Ghost, and you look at Five Finger Death Punch, and there's obviously there's a demand for it, and it's just not like there's no industry for it. There's no radio for it. There's no video for it. So I don't know. It's kind of a weird time. I just think that that there's definitely something going on. I smell a rat.
Yeah, I mean, to your point too, we were talking about recently how there used to be like Headbangers Ball at least
Mhm.
to
Yep.
break new metal artists, and we don't even really have that. Anyway, to Ken, you're an industry vet too. Like Fifth Angel's first record came out in like the late 80s, just so you know,
Yeah.
Joey. So talk about kind of your history of music, because Fifth Angel kind of was like big back then, and then you guys kind of took a hiatus, and now you're kind of back.
Well, yeah, the story on that, I mean, really is, Fifth Angel was our high school band, essentially, with James Bird, a guitar player, added. And yeah, we worked very hard in the early 80s. Like we saw Queensryche in 83, they put out their own record. Queensryche took a different track than all the bands that were in Seattle. Everybody was playing clubs and, trying to get a record deal and all that kind of stuff. And Queensryche was just like, they just honed in, they learned their craft, they created a great EP, and then the EP went out and started getting picked up by Kerrang magazine and a lot of the magazines in the United States. The first gig they played was opening for Ronnie James Dio. They went on tour with Ronnie James Dio. So we looked at that in Fifth Angel and we said, that's really what we want to do. We want to write and record our own songs. We don't want to play covers. We want to make our own material. And so we did, and we sent it to every label, and we got rejected by everybody. Everybody's like, thanks, but no thanks. And then Mike Varney, out of California with Shrapnel Records, he discovered Yngwie and so many amazing guitar players back in that era. But he heard our 4-song demo, and he thought it was, stellar. So he signed us to a record deal, and then we got distribution in Europe through a small company called Roadrunner Records, which now is the biggest label on the planet. I remember I was biggest metal label on the planet anyways, and I remember I was on the phone like negotiating with Stace Wessels. We're talking about what's going to go on with promotion and stuff. I remember I'm very young, and I'm on a phone call to the Netherlands, talking about our album. And so it came out on CBS originally in Europe, which was Roadrunner had a deal with CBS, but it wasn't a huge deal. And our album started kind of taking off and doing better than a lot of the major label products. And next thing we know, we were getting calls from New York City. Epic Records wanted to sign us. Concrete Management wanted to manage us, and they were a big deal at that time in that era. Concrete was very important in marketing. They marketed almost every major metal album from that era, and they managed us. So yeah, everything was looking really great, for the band. And, Epic Records at the time was the biggest record company in the world. They signed us to like a $21 million deal on like 8 albums. So I mean, everybody thinks like we got a check for, $21 million. That's not what happens. I mean, it all escalates. So, by the time you were making your last album, you were getting like $2 million or something. So, but they always have the option of dropping you. So, people don't really understand how that works. We obviously didn't, we never saw that money. But at the time, between the promotion budgets and the recording budgets, and it was a pretty spectacular deal for that era. And, people, I think, expected us to be the next big thing. We were from Seattle, Washington, just like Queensryche, and there was Metal Church from Seattle, Washington, and some bands that people know less about, like Q5 and TKO. But there was like a little metal scene happening.
The Accused?
It was another band that was in that era. So there was a cool metal scene that was happening, and I think we were sort of at the forefront of that, and at the forefront of, what I call now today, it's power metal. Power metal is what we were doing, back in the 80s, and a lot of the classic power metal bands, from today, I think we're probably, influenced to some degree by what we were doing. But anyway, I guess that was a lot of information. So you want to know about the hiatus? Is that correct?
Yeah. I wanted, that's a great, because I just noticed that, you guys, I remember Fifth Angel from back in the day, but then I was looking at your Wikipedia page and there's kind of like a long break. And then I think it was like 2018, you kind of came back into the picture. So I guess what kind of spurred that, and why did you guys kind of reunite and everything?
Well, it was actually, I'm going to give a shout out to Oliver from the Keep It True Festival. We played the Keep It True Festival in 2010 in Germany. And that festival sort of gave us an inkling that, hey, maybe the band was bigger in Europe than we thought it was. And, people were singing along to every song, and the response was incredible. And Jaap from Nuclear Blast Records, let us know he would be interested in hearing some demos. And then we tried writing for a while, and it was really weird because we had the combination and the chemistry is so important. Ted was no longer in the band, and we had Kendall, Ed, John, and myself, which are 4/5 of the band. That's an awful lot. But when we were writing, it just wasn't coming out, and it wasn't sounding like Fifth Angel. We weren't happy with it. So we really didn't, I think we sent a couple songs to Nuclear Blast and they weren't interested. And then around, I think 2017, maybe 2016, Kendall and I started writing, and I heard some demos that Kendall did and he sang on them, and he has, I didn't know it, but he had just this incredible voice. And I was like, man, you have to sing on the next record. And he's like, I don't know if I really want to do that. And I'm like, well, it sounds like Fifth Angel. It's got those roots, and the songs that we were writing together. And then John Macco also contributed, and so this little chemistry we had all of a sudden showed up, and it sounded exciting, and it sounded impactful, and it sounded still like Fifth Angel. So we were very excited about that. We sent the demos to Jaap. We sent him 3 songs. I think it was Queen of Thieves, We Will Rise, and maybe Stars Are Falling, I think, were maybe the first 3 songs we sent him. And he was like, hey, let's do a deal. And so they did. And The Third Secret came out in 2018 and had killer reviews, and did very well in Europe. I'm not sure about the United States as much, but we've always been like the kind of thing that does very well in Europe. And so that was really the re-entry of the band into the marketplace. I think at the time we put that album out, it was 28 years since we put out a record or something. So yeah, it was a long gap. And I think it really was because in the early 90s, ironically, out of Seattle, grunge started taking off. And it was a weird, I got to be honest with you, I don't like the whole grunge thing. They were making fun of bands like Ozzy and Kiss and Iron Maiden and Aerosmith. They were mocking them, some of them openly. Like I saw one clip of the singer from Alice in Chains mocking Megadeth. And so
Yeah.
Kind of weird that, that kind of music just wiped everything else out. Like if you were a fan of grunge, you hated everything else. And so like basically either you were grunge or you sucked. And I thought that was really like one of the worst periods in music history. I mean, that never has happened before, where it was just like, hey, get out of here. But that's pretty much what happened. We lost our deal, and there were other things going on. We had other issues within the band, but the thing that cemented it, that went like, okay, there's not going to be any more Fifth Angel music for 28 years, was the grunge movement. We lost our deal. There was no internet. You couldn't really interact with your fans back then. Once you lost your deal, you were basically erased. So we all just went and did different things.
2 things to interject right here. I just talked to Janet Gardner from Vixen a couple weeks ago, and she said almost the same thing. And then Nuno Betancourt, Extreme just put a new record out, and it's doing really well. And it's so funny because I have this distinct memory of the guys from the band Blind Melon making fun of Nuno when they kind of got big. And I'm like, who's laughing now? Because that guy died, and Blind Melon, like, no one knows who they are, but Extreme's still putting records out. So,
well, that's the weird thing is, they mocked these bands. They wouldn't even let Ozzy on what was that festival they had? I forgot what they called.
Lollapalooza.
Yeah, and
he made Ozfest.
Do that, and he went, hey, here's to you guys. I'm going to go do my own thing, and it was huge, Ozfest, and
arguably
so
bigger.
Funny, they were mocking all those bands, and then they lasted for like 2 years. It was like a short-lived thing. I thought there were a few great songs. I thought there were a few great bands, but by and large, like I was a Soundgarden fan. I think they had some pretty incredible stuff. But by and large, most of the stuff from that era, I wasn't really that impressed with the musicians or the songs. But they did, there were some great ones. I mean, Smells Like Teen Spirit, first time I heard that, I went, oh my God, like you knew something was happening there. There was some amazing stuff happening. And then on the flip side, it didn't last long, and it wiped out so many things. And I thought it was a really bad attitude of the fans and the industry. And, Europe didn't really go through that. I mean, in Europe, the grunge thing never really took off. to the extent it did in the United States. And they didn't just, you know, it wasn't one of those things where they just hated you if you weren't grunge. You know, like they still respected bands like, you know, Kiss and Iron Maiden and Aerosmith and all these bands. And you know, they stayed loyal to their artists, which I thought was you know, there's another difference between the US and Europe.
There's a classical tie-in too. I think like Europe just appreciates like classically trained musicians more probably, and in America it's more about the pop charts, right? It's like,
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think they appreciate musicianship maybe a little bit more. I think the other thing too is I don't think they bought into the hype of, you know, if you either like this and everything else is garbage. You know, that never happened. You know, there's a lot of bands that were selling tons of records even in the middle of grunge, but they were doing it in Europe. But I mean, if you look back and you remember it, I mean, even bands like Metallica and Megadeth had a really dark period in there where they almost didn't survive. You know, like it was a very weird period, and I hope the music business never sees anything like it again, because it was really, I just thought it was not right on so many levels.
yeah, it's almost like the labels went like, hey, these guys will be cheaper. It's like what corporate America does when they like kind of clear out the old people that they have to pay like legacy salaries to and hire a bunch of college kids at cheaper salary rates. You know, it's kind of like, let's get rid of all these old rock stars that we're paying all this money to and like bring in some fresh young talent we can rip off.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, when you would talk about the rip off, I mean, yeah, that's a whole nother interview, but oh boy, I have stories.
Well, so one of the things I picked up out of your reading your bios and stuff is you guys worked with Terry Date back in the day, who, you know, obviously went on to produce Pantera stuff. Like, do you still talk to him, or how did that come about?
I think I reached out to him a year and a half ago. I think we emailed or something, but you know, we haven't had close contact. Actually, Ed Archer does. I think he does. He's contacted him a few times, and he's talked with him a few times. But yeah, actually, what's funny about that is the Fifth Angel, the first self-titled album, that was Terry Date's first album ever.
Oh wow!
And it was our first album ever too. And we all kind of learned some things together, I think. I mean, we were experimenting with all kinds of stuff. We were like, hey, let's put some exciter on cymbals. Let's you know, throw some heavy compression on the stereo bus. You know, let's try some different things. I mean, I think Terry was extremely talented, you know, for his era and for, you know, for that time. He was actually super talented, and no one knew it yet. And certainly he really assisted in our record. But I do think that we also probably maybe helped him a little bit too, just a little bit in terms of, you know, like just experimenting and trying some different things. And we were using drum samples back then, like experimenting with that and experimenting with, you know, doing things to, like, back then doing stuff to a click track wasn't a given because it was analog tape, and we had a drum machine, and we would play to it, and we would program in tempo changes and things. So we were actually kind of ahead of the curve. If you go back and you listen to that album, it was all done on 2-inch tape, and it sounds like we had Pro Tools. I mean, everything is perfectly in time, perfectly in pitch. It's super tight. You know, the band are very proficient musicians. I'm still very, very proud of that album all these years later. Like, I go listen to it and go, you know, for how young we were and inexperienced, you know, all of us probably, you know, even Terry at that point, we really did create something that stood the test of time. And I think that's, you know, that really says something.
Yeah, he produced some of my favorite albums, like from the Deftones and Pantera. But then also, you're basically an engineer now too. I mean, obviously your backdrop, it's evident, but I read a little bit, like you've worked with a lot of big name bands like Megadeth and Alice Cooper and stuff yourself, right?
Yeah, actually, I've done a lot of engineering and producing over the years myself, and I really enjoy that too. I mean, I love it. This is not my studio. This is just my home studio. My real studio is like a full-on SSL 6000 and tons of outboard gear and a great drum room and you know, the whole deal. Yeah, if you want, I could, you know, email you a picture later or whatever. But
yeah, that's something I dabble in a little bit. So I'm
I mean, it's funny because it all started, you know, back in the 80s with a 4-track cassette recorder. And then somehow it grew into this, you know, massive studio, and it was a great business. We did an incredible amount of work, all for, I'd say, I mean, we're still doing a lot of work, but not as much music based as we used to in the past. In the past, we were about like 80% music and 20%, peripheral kind of, television or film or something like that. Now it's about like probably almost reverse, probably like 70% television, film work, that kind of thing, and then probably 30% music. So it's definitely a paradigm shift, but it's been it's been a great experience. I really love every aspect of music, the writing, producing, engineering. I really do love all of it.
Did you record the new album?
I did, yes.
Sounds great.
Well, I produced the new album. I recorded drums, orchestration, keyboards, all the vocals, all the background vocals. The guitars were done. Ed Archer's guitars were done at his studio. Jim Dofka's guitars were done at his studio. Steve Conley's were done at his studio, and John Macco recorded the bass in his studio. So, but I basically had to, assemble everything and mix it and do all of that. So it was nice that, you can kind of farm out some of that, where you don't have to be there for I guess, tracking of bass, for instance. But everybody's a proficient engineer at recording their own instrument, and I think it that allowed us to actually be in different locations at different times during COVID and still get everything done that we had to get done.
That's so cool that you can just kind of like dump the mix into a Google Drive or whatever,
yeah.
and then those guys can track their parts and send it back to you.
Yeah, which, the technology, I mean, compared to what we were doing when we were kids, I mean, the technology is stunning. I mean, I remember, even not that far ago, before the internet was really able to send large files, I remember where we would have to send drives like FedEx, to other people in different states. Yeah, you're going to get the FedEx tomorrow, and just open it up and whatever. I mean, when you think about how technology has changed and how it's definitely made things so much easier for the musicians. It really is an amazing thing. And plus, you can make copies. I mean, think about this. Back in the day, you'd record on that 2-inch tape. Anything happens to that 2-inch tape,
that's your masters.
That's it. Those, there's no copy of that, so that was a dangerous era. I mean, if like, great thing now is you can just make digital copies at will. And, there are really tremendous advantages. And then there's some disadvantages too. I think the ability of the technology to accommodate musicians and help their deficiencies. Like, we have auto tune for singers. We have Beat Detective for drummers. You're a drummer, you can't really play, but you know what, we can make you sound like you're amazing. And I think that's almost a weird thing too. Like, I in some sense, I don't like that, because a lot of times what you're getting on a record is fake. And I think it's a double-edged sword, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about the backing tracks debate that's going on right now? I mean, Eddie Trunk is one of those guys who's been out there like, hey, I don't pay $300 a ticket to go see a band play their computers.
Well, I just think it depends on what extent the backing tracks, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the whole show's on backing tracks, or are we talking about some background vocals and some keyboards? Are we talking about the lead vocals are on backing tracks? I mean, now all of a sudden you're getting into some weird stuff. And the weird thing about it is, you and I look like we're, somewhat roughly in the same generation. You talk to younger people, about some of the artists. And, I remember hearing a friend of mine's daughter, they were, Britney Spears fans, and they're like, yeah, we don't care that she doesn't sing because she's dancing. And I'm like, okay, so you don't care, that she's not singing, and you're okay with that. And I'm like, hey, if it works for them, that's fine. I kind of look at it and I go, well, did you ever hear of like Tina Turner or Madonna? Like, they danced
Michael
too,
Jackson.
but they sang and they did their thing. So I'm not saying I don't endorse that by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think there's differing levels. And I'm going to be honest with you about something. You know, I grew up, the first concert I saw was Kiss. And, you know, in my brain, you know, it's just this incredible concert, you know, that, you know, bombs were going off and, you know, it was music that I loved and, you know, all of these things. And I saw Kiss in I think right before COVID broke out. I think it was like 2019 or something. And, you know, I knew that some of the tracks, you know, were, you know, some of the stuff was on tracks. And I'm going to be 100% honest, I was okay with it because
cool.
I knew it wasn't the whole thing. And I would rather see my heroes, you know, from my childhood still sound amazing than go out there and not sound amazing. Does that sound bad? I mean, so
No.
I know people are talking about this a lot. I just think it depends on the artist. You know, let's put it this way: none of us are 25 anymore. You know,
right.
and playing these songs, it's not like playing Rolling Stones songs where you could be 70 years old and still play the drums and all this stuff. Like these songs, you know, when you talk about rock, you know, metal and rock, you know, it's a lot of it's difficult to do that as you get older. So like some of these older bands that are using some tracks, I mean, for me, I don't care, but that's my thing.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate the honesty. I'm the same way. Like you said, I think it depends on what the level of it is, and how you're kind of putting it out there. Like if it's just some backing tracks, some arrangements or background vocals, a lot of bands do that. But you know, if your whole set is on the computers, like there's a whole debate with this guy from band Falling in Reverse and Sebastian Bach, and they're like, we couldn't play our show because someone took our laptops. And Sebastian
well,
Bach's
you know,
like,
I gotta say, I love Falling in Reverse. I mean, I think that they have some just brilliant,
they have some great stuff. Yeah,
they really do. But you know, on the flip side, you know, if you're going on tour and you're dependent on the laptop, I mean, I don't know, maybe have another laptop.
Have a backup.
I don't know, have a backup or something, or you know,
be able to do an acoustic
yet,
set or something.
Work out a way to play your show where, you know, you could still do your show. And maybe it wouldn't be the same show. Maybe it wouldn't have all the bells and whistles, but maybe you could still do a show. And, you know, I think, you know, that I forget what the guy's name is, but, you know, the singer's extremely talented, you know, very, you know, incredible talent. And, you know, it seems weird that you wouldn't be able to do a show without a laptop. That seems a little weird to me. I don't think I would be comfortable doing that at any point.
Yeah.
I just saw an article yesterday, Wolfgang Van Halen on backing tracks. He says, if you need a laptop with 60 stems running to play your show, that's not a show. And then he goes on to say, like, if your laptop goes down, you should be able to play. So
yeah.
I agree. If your laptop goes down, it shouldn't stop everything. You know, you should be able to continue to do your show and finish out a great show.
And he's super talented. I've seen him a couple of times, and he does a great job. You know, and he's legit.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of legit musicians. You know, you mentioned Extreme. You know, I think that new album is killer, and it's, you know, it's kind of filling a void, and just the fact that it's doing what it's doing right now in an era where there's no venue for that tells me that there's a demand for that's not being filled. You know, I just think that, you know, rock and metal, you know, I'd like to see it be a little more, like I said, not suppressed by the industry. I would like to see that.
I'm with you. I have a son who plays in a band, and they won their high school battle of the bands, and they played Gojira and Converge songs. Nice. And I was surprised that the two of the judges were drummers. So I think that's part of the reason.
Right.
But there's definitely, even in my son's generation, I go to pick my kids up from school, and I see people wearing Soundgarden and Metallica and Megadeth shirts and stuff. And so I'm like, metal lives on.
It's a great, you know, and where is the outlet for it? You know, like, where's the MTV? Where are the radio stations playing this? You know, like, you know, you listen to radio, it's just, and I understand we live in a fragmented society, and it's not like it was back in the day where, you know, like what you mentioned Headbangers Ball, you know, and millions of people used to gather on the weekends. You know, there would be parties based around Headbangers Ball, and everybody would watch and see what the new band was and what the new song was. and there was an excitement about it. And, you know, I understand it's a different day and age, but we live in an instant time now where you can see and hear anything, anytime. And I think, you know, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I'm believing now it's probably a bad thing.
Yeah, I think the problem to some degree with social media and the kind of the era we live in is people are kind of able to curate their own little bubble and nothing penetrates that. And I think,
right,
to your point, like it's kind of like that's kind of what we're trying to do here is elevate just rock and metal stuff or just heavy stuff in general that
sure.
doesn't have the type of platform that, like, you know, The Weeknd or rap artists maybe have right now. And I see it popping up a little bit more. I see more kind of like metal type channels popping up on YouTube and that, but you know, it's not like it used to be, that's for sure.
Well, I will tell you this, from what I've seen on YouTube, I'm going to try and just change my camera just a little bit here. See if that helps or makes it worse. Does that help at all?
Oh, it looks, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed is that there are a lot of videos, especially from metal bands, that do not seem to be proliferated into the feed as much as other styles of music. And I think that's very intentional. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, because YouTube is really, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, that is the radio station of today. You know, a lot of people are going to find out about their music from YouTube. And it seems to me like, you know, again, it's a format that is not necessarily free, I guess is the best way to describe that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is what it is, you know, and you still have to, you know, put out your music and all of that. But it does seem to me like I do not see metal songs really go into the playlists and really start, you know, generating interest. And by the same token, there's tons of rap. And here's another great example. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of this band, but Greta Van Fleet, you know, they will sell out a Coliseum of 15 to 17,000 people. And if you look at their YouTube videos, they struggle to get to like 1 million something, you know, like 1.2 million or whatever. Like their videos are not getting played much. And they'll sell out a Coliseum. And then you look at some of the rap artists, they'll have 140 million views and they can't sell out a club. And I'm going,
yeah.
These numbers aren't adding up. You're telling me this artist got 150 million views and they can't fill out a 500 person club, but this band is getting like only 1 million views and they're selling out a Coliseum. Something's messed up there. You know what I mean?
Well, as someone who comes from a digital marketing background, I can tell you that a lot of those artists, and even this applies to political candidates and stuff today, they buy followers and likes. And there's outfits, especially in politics, that build armies of fake profiles with like dead people's photos and stuff like that to follow their candidates and elevate their tweets and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a big part of it. But then also the algorithmic thing is self-perpetuating. So, you know, the more people listen to rap music, the more that gets elevated to the point where I've seen feeds from like Spotify's API, and you don't even get to a rock or metal artist till like 50 down, you know, and then it's like Linkin Park.
And that's my point. My point is like I think it's at the algorithmic level, in my opinion.
Ken, you gotta start a TikTok channel and just get like a 10-second clip of one of your songs to go viral, and then you got it made.
Yeah, there you go. Well, the funny thing about TikTok is, you know, as an older metal band, you know, like, I don't know, man, it's like, it's very youth oriented. You know, I know some metal bands that have tried to do something on that format, and they've, you know, it was not successful.
Yeah, you have to, it's what's interesting about formats like TikTok, and I follow a lot of comedians, and I saw this guy Theo Vaughn talking about how he doesn't even have a TikTok. He does his podcast, and then other people clip his podcast and put it on TikTok. So it's almost like you have to create that kind of virality to some degree.
I agree. And then, we talk about that in some of with some of the musicians that I work with. And we were like, well, how could you get anything going on TikTok? And our take on it was it would have to be something humorous. Like it would have to be something funny. That could go viral. Like if you just put on like a music video or a chunk of a music video, probably nothing's going to happen. You'd have to really work it. And then how do you do that as a metal band? I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. Like Nuno Betancourt, that song they have Arise, where he does this crazy solo, that kind of went viral to some degree, but it went viral on an algorithmic level to people like me who like watch metal channels. So where it popped up in my feed because I went, oh, what's this? Because the guy from Dragon Force did a like podcast about check this solo out,
Wow.
So it's there, but it's not like, to your point, it doesn't self-perpetuate like the rap stuff does. And I don't think that the metal people have gotten the memo yet, like with the fake followers. Also, like who wants to do that? Like I'm not gonna
I don't want to do that. Yeah.
Right. And it's almost like if you don't get noticed.
And I have heard, I'm trying to remember the artist, but there's one of my artists that I worked with that was telling me he bought a bunch of followers and everything. And I think the format I think it was on Facebook. And he said it ruined his page because the fake followers don't really interact. And then what happens is you can't even reach the real people because you're only going to reach a small percentage of your entire, like let's say you have 100,000 followers, you might only reach, 5 or 10,000 of those. So what happened was, he couldn't even reach his actual people. So yeah, you have to, I think the whole fake follower thing is
it's a bad move in the end.
Yeah, it's a bad move. I think. Yeah.
And also, like to your point, it gets you flagged for spam, and it can in some cases get your page shut down. But the way that these social platforms work now, especially Facebook, is it's almost like so many people spend money boosting their content or like paying them to be seen, that if you don't do that, you're less likely to be seen because everyone else is paying, for a spot. So
Absolutely.
Your stuff just gets pushed down. Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dustin, I've got to go in just a few minutes. Is there anything else that?
Yeah, before you sign off, just tell us where you guys are going to be playing. Plug anything that you want to plug. I love the new album.
Oh, let me grab the vinyl real quick. So I can show that. The album is out on Nuclear Blast. It's the fourth Fifth Angel album. There's some cool things about it. It's a concept album. It's a double concept album. It is almost 70 minutes long. And it has little interludes in it. It's actually more of a movie. Like if you close your eyes, you can pretty much see the whole movie. And so right now we're trying to, obviously, it's kind of a weird business thing. It's like, you can go listen to it for free on Spotify and YouTube. But of course, we would like our real fans to, get a CD or an album. And right now that's on Nuclear Blast, which is probably the biggest metal label in Europe at this point, and certainly a great company. And the album seems to so far be doing well. We're getting great reviews. I mean, people have said great things about it, and everybody seems to really be, loving it. And we have had a few haters, which are always, honestly, we have very few, which I feel very fortunate about. But that is a funny thing about social networking that you, seems like everybody has an opinion on everything. But yeah, as far as what we're trying to do now is, we're just trying to get that record into as many hands as possible. And then we have some shows coming up in 2024. I'm not sure what we're going to be doing in terms of 2023, but we're certainly trying to spread the word as much as we can. So thank you so much for having me on the show and
Absolutely.
Talking about the industry and the album and we really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Can people buy the vinyl on your website or?
Well, the weird thing is I think it's sold out on Amazon, which is a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think it's still available on Nuclear Blast's website out of Europe. The problem is the shipping is kind of prohibitive. You know, I think I have a friend that just bought it off of the Nuclear Blast site, and you know, he told me how much he paid. I can't remember what it was, but it was, I think, more than probably most people would want to pay. But they still do have CDs on Amazon, and of course, you know, you can stream it and on Spotify and YouTube, and you know, whatever our fans can do, we certainly appreciate it.
Awesome. Well,
we
thank you for
definitely
taking the time,
appreciate
man.
support. You know, we've had great support, and it's one of those things, you know, we will never take it for granted, because, you know, you work hard to create some art, and you know, when people love it and they appreciate it and enjoy it, you know, there's nothing better, you know, there's really nothing better than that.
We'll come back on and talk to us again when you guys have some tours lined up, or you know, if you have
I would
anything
love to. Yeah, well,
to talk
let's
about.
definitely do a follow-up. I really enjoyed talking with you guys, and we'll definitely love to do it again.
Much appreciated, sir.
Thank you.
Awesome.
You guys have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.